The beginning of a talk is like the top button on your shirt. If it's misaligned, everything else will be out of line. Humans, we're selfish animals. We're all sitting there going, I'm listening to this for me. Now, you might not think that, but we all are. Great communicators are great connectors. They find that spot where they can connect. It's telling a story. Great salespeople aren't known as great salespeople, right? They're just known as, I just like this guy. I'll end up buying stuff from them. As soon as possible, you're putting a finger on where their struggle is and articulating it back to them more clearly than they're thinking it themselves.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gridiron and Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Bennie Fowler, along with my co-host, Ryan Harris. And today we have a special guest, a good friend of mine, speaking coach, helps me write some of my material and speeches if you've heard me speak. Jeff Davenport, welcome to the show, my friend.
What's up, Jeff?
I feel like I'm on sports radio. And I don't know enough about sports to be on sports radio, but I'm tickled to be here.
Well, Jeff, really appreciate you. I've always enjoyed getting together with you. We always have some really great conversations where we talk about interesting things, life, and then you also help me write speeches or great content. You help me storytell. So would love to just get into...
Wait, let me interrupt. Can I interrupt you? Am I allowed
please
to?
do.
All right,
here we go.
Okay,
so we got this fly in here.
We got a fly in here.
I got a paper in here, because I'm old school.
You're going to roll it up and hit it.
Yeah, man. We can get it out of here. But keep going, Jeff.
If you listen to the podcast, you know this about Bennie. Hopefully you know this about Bennie. Bennie's like, well, Jeff's helping me with my storytelling. Bennie's got the best stories. And it's not just from football, but it's from all parts of life. You are so good at... You're not just someone who walks around talking in platitudes, but you're able to think in terms of, ooh, this happened to me on this team with this coach, with this player, or in this business setting, and take that and boil that down and bring out some sort of lesson of value for people. So I always love talking with you because you're a font of stories.
I appreciate it. And I've heard you tell us plenty of stories. So would love to just dive into, how did you get into writing, speaking? What was that journey like? Where did you really find that passion to doing it? Because I know you coach and you consult on it all the time, so would love to learn a little bit more about that.
Well, I always say my resume is a dog's breakfast. It was like a little bit of everything. I went to graduate school at USC out in California. I'm so sorry, you're Mr. Notre Dame.
Fight on.
Go.
Fight
Come
on.
on, man. Yeah. Good. 30 minutes.
No, I studied screenwriting, and I wanted to be a screenwriter. And so I was like, I'm going to make my way in Hollywood, and really not much came out of it until sometime later. I ended up writing some TV movies with my writing partner and I. And so I thought, well, that's where I'm going to head is into that. But then I started doing more and more public speaking, just kind of unrelated. And I had enough people come up to me and go, well, you seem to know what you're doing when you're up there. I said, well, thanks, I appreciate it. And they'd say, can you help me do that in business? And I was like, well, I guess I can. And so I started doing more and more coaching and then writing speeches for people. And so I've been doing that now for, over a decade. And I really love it. I'm passionate about communication. And I always tell people, I work with all sorts of people, whether they're CEOs or I was just out with a bunch of information systems people out in California last week, and just all walks of life. And I can't believe I'm doing what I'm doing because, to be honest with you guys, when I was in high school, I was the shyest kid in my high school. Wow. I was a wallflower. I was voted least likely to be remembered. I was just Mr. Nobody. I did anything I could to blend in. And to think now that I do lots of public speaking and I train other people to communicate is just, I imagine it would be if y'all know somebody who was like the worst athlete growing up and then they went pro. And you go, that guy? I look in the mirror sometimes and go, that guy? That doesn't make any sense.
Do you run into anybody from high school that you see and then you're like, you tell them what you're doing, they're like, no way?
Well, I wish I could say yes, but the fact is if I ran into anybody from high school, they'd go, wait, we went to the same high school? so it defeat the purpose.
Yeah. What were those moments? Clearly you maybe encountered self-doubt or just that moment where you're like, oh, people want me to help them speak. Mm-hmm. How did you internally create the programs that you now help people speak at? How did you make that, knowing that you maybe weren't the best speaker in your own mind?
I wasn't a good speaker, and then I got good, I guess. I got good. And so I was, to some degree. People seem to like listening to me.
Practice or repetition?
Just getting the reps in. And so I would get in front of people, and a lot of it was in a church setting, but up in front of people and more people and more people. And then you get to a point where, it seems like people don't cringe when I'm up there, but I might have something of value. And then to transition over to coaching was, you have to stop and go, now what have I learned? How would I codify the things that I have learned through practice, through trial and error? I tried this didn't work. I thought this would work, and this, all the advice, and you take it and you try to boil it down, and then you go, can I pass this along to someone else? I imagine it's like a player who has become a coach. They look back at their history, they look back on all the things they've learned, success, failure, and then they're able to somehow hand that off to someone else. And so it's been a continual process. To this day, I'm still changing how I talk about things and learning what works, what doesn't work as I talk to people. And that kind of constant sharpening is what I really love. And then you start to learn different ways of applying it to different people and that kind of thing.
I would say you're a master communicator. You've put in your 10,000 hours and even more, and you're probably starting to pattern recognize now. Where do people go wrong when it comes to communicating their message?
That is, well, I appreciate you saying that. That's very kind of you. There are 1,000. It's sad to say there's about 10 ways it goes right and 1,000 ways it could go wrong. I find, though, if I had to, what's top of mind for me lately is I just over and over when I'm working with executives, when I'm working with anybody, it's the beginning. It's what's the first thing out of your mouth when I would say when you're in front of 1,000 people and you step onto the stage, when you're with 100 people, when you're stepping into an important meeting. Usually the first thing out of our mouths is, okay, thanks everybody. Boy, I'm really glad to be here. Or, even in a meeting, all right, well, I guess let's get started. And that's all fine. But two things. One, if it's not powerful, you're going to have a problem. And two, it's a wasted opportunity. I always think of it as the beginning of a talk is like the top button on your shirt. If it's misaligned, everything else will be out of line. Mm-hmm. Wow, and so nice. I'm constantly, this is the methodology I go about with anybody, is that your opening should generally follow this structure. And this isn't straight from my brain. It's sort of a consolidation of a few people's thinkings, but it's empathy, authority, and agenda. Empathy meaning, what do they need? And if as soon as possible, you're not talking about, well, let me tell you about me, or or my product, or let me tell you about, there's something that's probably, there's as we say in Texas, a hitch in your giddy up. There's something that's keeping you from accomplishing something. And so you put your finger on that pain a little bit. And then you transition over to authority. And by authority, what I mean is, why am I the right person to be heard right now on this? And then you go agenda. So over the next few minutes, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. So empathy, I know there's something you're trying to accomplish. It's hard to get there. I think I can help you. My name's so-and-so. I've done this in this amount of time. Da-da-da-da-da-da. We're going to talk about these things. That structure works constantly. For
meetings too? Would you do that for a meeting? A CEO is getting ready to lead his executive meeting with, his C-suite. You want him to open,
yes.
Him or her to open with empathy, authority, agenda.
Yes. So empathy. So for that situation, it's a little less formal because we know each other. Empathy is, all right, we're aiming for this as a team, and you get some head nods. We're running into this, aren't we? We sure are. Now, authority, then you don't go, by the way, I'm the CEO you've known for the last 10 years. My name, that would feel really awkward.
You're in my office.
You're in my office. By the way, if we haven't met again. Instead, that authority piece right there, if they know you already, it's as simple as going, I've been looking into this for the last couple of weeks really intently. Mm-hmm. And so then the people go, all right, this isn't just the CEO going, hey, we're going to talk about these things. It's the CEO going, I've already been thinking about these things and having this conversation. And then you transition over into empathy or agenda, this. Where a lot of people run into a problem is with the opening of whatever talk they're giving or whatever meeting they're running. If they're going to do those things, they inadvertently or advertently transpose empathy and authority. So what they start with is the authority. And they start with, I see this a lot with speakers. Hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm the CEO of this. I've built this company from this, and this. And then they might transition into empathy. The problem with that is when you start off with authority, it either sounds like braggadocio, like you're just bragging, or the audience hears because they don't know the context. They don't have context in themselves of why it matters that I'm listening to this person. I tell every communication workshop that I run, humans, we're selfish animals. We're all sitting there going, I'm listening to this for me. Now, you might not think that, but we all are. And so if a communicator can get as soon as possible to that, what are you needing? How can I help you? I mean, Bennie, at the end of, listeners may or may not know this, at the end of every time I've ever hung out with Bennie, he kind of sits up a little straight. He looks at me, he goes, well, Jeff, what can I do for you? And it's that kind of mentality that every speaker should have. Every speaker should have, every leader should have. There's something on the table here. It's affecting all of us. I want to help alleviate some pain. And that's the empathy part. Transition to authority and then agenda.
You're talking about connection, really. You're connecting first with the audience and then giving them reason to continue to listen.
Yes.
I've been told as a speaker, or comedy, humor is good to connect as well. Outside of a, slam dunk open, getting on base, where else can people find connection points in either presenting or introducing themselves to somebody?
You're always looking for those relatable moments. And so, okay, listeners, I'm sitting here across from two men who really couldn't be more different from me. I'm not an athlete. I've never been paid to be an athlete. I didn't have to think about that. We couldn't be more different. And so I've known Bennie for a while. Ryan, I just met you a few moments ago. And what's going on in the back of my head is, well, gosh, we're so different. But what's a connection point? Well, pretty soon we find out we both lived in Houston. Yeah. And then cities are a fine connection point. But then I'm realizing, Ryan's married. This is a family man. Well, I can immediately relate to a family man because I'm a family man. Right. And so I'm wanting to hear about your marriage. And, we didn't get to it, but I really wanted to hear about your children. Those relatable points are so important. We're all vastly different. It doesn't matter what we look, we're all just vastly different. And so great communicators, going back to your language earlier, great communicators are great connectors. They find that spot where they can connect. I think another way to establish a connection early on is not just fact unloading with someone or a group of people. I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. It's telling a story. And it's a story is something with a beginning, middle, and end. And that story, there's all sorts of science around this. It establishes such a connection through mirror neurons with the other person. There is what's called neural coupling, that when I tell a story, especially a personal story, there's that your brain is firing the same way my brain is while I'm telling that story. Cortisol's released, all sorts of chemicals are released, but it just provides this very unique connection point right there. And I'd almost guarantee you that when both of you met your wives, when I met my wife, and we're sort of starting to establish those connections, we told some story, or she told some story to us, and it was like, hang on. We didn't recognize it. Nobody waved a flag and went, wait, what's going on here? Yeah. But something happened there. Something big was happening there. So stories are very important.
Stories are important. And I think also what I heard from the connection piece is that asking the right questions. And I think it's something that I like to pride myself on is not the weather or, the cities that we lived in, but what's been the best part of 2024 for you, or what are you super excited about as you are finishing up the summer? Super Communicators is a book that I just read by
Charles Duhigg.
Yeah, incredible book. And he stop asking about the weather or how somebody's day is going. Ask them what's been the best part about their day.
That's right.
You get more than a yes or no answer.
You're very good at that. You're very good at that. And I just want to affirm that. And Ryan, I'm getting to know you, but I think that is a superpower. I'm in the middle of that book. I'm enjoying it. That's a superpower. Because we're just surrounded by people who they either ask very surface questions that really don't matter, or God bless us, we all like to talk about ourselves, and that's the problem of being on a podcast. Then now I got to talk about myself, but that's our default. But man, I'll brag on my wife for a moment. God, I love her. When people come into our home, they walk away going, well, I've seen this happen many times. They look at my wife and go, "Is she for real?" And I kind of look at her and go, yeah, she's for real. She's beautiful. She's whip smart. She's fun and funny. But boy, she just wants to know. And I've had people walk away going, now that was a little intense because she asked a lot of big, hard questions. My wife couldn't care less. She's going to ask the big, deep questions. And she asked those kinds of questions. And if people's, our defenses are up, and it's natural. Like, what does she want to write a book? No, she just really wants to know people better. And we're trying to train our daughters on this, that we want to be genuinely curious humans.
Yes.
Genuinely curious humans. And I think that's golly, Brene Brown says, you can't hate someone up close. Meaning we hate people groups, or I don't like them politically, I don't like this, I don't like. It's hard to hate someone up close. And when you ask questions of someone, and good questions, real questions, and in business, it means not just asking like, well, tell me about the time that you were most embarrassed. It's, well, how is this reorg? How are you feeling about it? Like getting to some emotional language there, I think is really, really important.
It is. It is really important, and it's helped me in quite a few sales meetings. Asking those thoughtful questions, not like, oh, tell me about your family, your family and all that other, I want to know what's the most challenging leadership moment you've had and how did you handle it? Or, you're getting ready to exit this business. Have you thought about the transition? What does transition look like for you?
Right.
It's like, all right, now this meeting just turned into from 30 minutes to an hour and a half. And I think that's the way conversations should be had.
Yes. And I bet as well, Benny, you're not just asking it as some sort of utilitarian thing, but you're also, you're collecting, we're all collecting whether we know it or not, but you're collecting these little bits of insight for yourself that you can pass along to others as well. And there's real value in that. I think Tim Ferriss, author of the 4-Hour Workweek, he talks about asking people questions. And he says, really what you're doing, and when you're a good question asker, you're like a gold miner. You're mining for gold. And I really think maybe the first couple of questions can be a little surface because you're just trying to break the ice. If I walked in here and shook hands with Ryan and said, Ryan, what's the hardest thing you've ever faced in your life right off the bat? You're like, I don't know who this cat is, but this is not going well.
Being born, 1 in 400 trillion, right?
That's right. Yes, that's right. You beat the odds there. It's warming up towards someone, but getting to a point where we can get to know one another, whether that's just in regular relationships or business as well.
I want you to put your sales hat on, sales coach hat, and going to from empathy to authority agenda, because we've had a couple of sales coaches on here. What does it look like for you to have that type of sales interaction, or you're coaching a salesperson? Because Craig Wortman was on and he talked about the purpose benefit check before every meeting, having that type of performance and agenda and being process driven. Yes. What's yours?
I would say that it's still that empathy authority agenda. It's as soon as possible. Well, we go to the challenger mindset, the sales mindset, which is really the question asking, going back to that. But I do think as soon as possible, great salespeople aren't known as great salespeople, right? They're just known as, I just like this guy. And then we'll end up buying stuff from him. It's that, I think it's empathy is as soon as possible, you're putting a finger on where their struggle is and articulating it back to them more clearly than they're thinking it themselves. I think it's Nir Eyal talks about you're offering painkillers, not vitamins. And so if you can articulate that as soon as possible, that's great. I'm working with a sales team at a very large tech organization right now and doing some training for them. And it's really around how can you, as soon as possible, tell a story of another customer that quote unquote rhymes with the listener's story. And so there's studies, if you read the book, The Storytelling Animal by Jonathan Gottschall, he talks about how stories are really, they function as like flight simulators. When I tell a story about, let's just say I'm telling a story about my marriage. Again, you're listening to it, oh, that's a nice story, but you're really thinking about yourself and when you will face a similar situation. And it's almost like a zero stakes or a low stakes way of running it through in your own brain yourself. That's why it's good for children to read fiction, because they're actually running through scenarios, relationship scenarios in their brain in these little simulators. As soon as possible within a sales meeting, if you can talk to the person who you're talking to and tell them a story of someone who is somewhat like them, who faced similar who had similar goals, similar challenges, and they found a way, through your product, through your service to achieve those, that's going to resonate with that audience. So I would say the empathy portion is as soon as possible, articulating what it is that their struggle is, what their goal is, what their struggle is, and then bringing in a story of someone or a situation similar to theirs.
What about talking about tough topics? Like let's say I'm going to go talk to an all-white board about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Or I'm going to talk to people about racism and how it affects people today still, and with data and things like that. How do you talk about tough topics that engages people to maybe step a little closer to a new idea?
Yeah, I would say first off, as a communicator, it's interesting. You're sort of, to some degree, you're talking to people who you are saying they might have some sort of prejudice within them,
or an idea that's not me, or I don't agree with this,
Sure.
or I don't think this is valuable.
Anything like that, the communicator has to start with themselves and go, now hang on, have I already built into my head who they are? And have I already put them in a box, or can I empathize with them? Any therapist does this. Like I saw a therapist a number of years ago. I was dealing with some fear issues, and and I'm like, gosh, I can't believe I can't get over this fear. It's driving me nuts. And the therapist is like, you need to come to a place where you realize, based off of your history, there's a reason you would feel the way you're feeling. Now, we're not going to stay there. We're going to move on. But there's a reason.
Or something.
Yeah, some experience, whatever it is. There's a reason you're feeling the way you're feeling. And only once you come to terms with that can we work on it. In the same way, I would say to a communicator, like I've worked with communicators before who are looking at a team and going, these morons, they can't da-da-da-da-da. And I let them spill it out, and I go, now hang on. Let's empathize with them. Why do we think they're there? Why do we think they're feeling those things? Well, I don't know. Then let's do a little work. And so we talk through it, well, because of this, and because we did this reorg, and because of this, because they had these experiences, this. All right. Now, we're not saying what they're doing is right. We can finally see from their perspective. I used to work for a communication firm called Duarte, and they would beat this into our head all the time. It's empathy. It's just seeing the perspective of the other person. And once you're there, then you can build out the content. Then you can go, okay, now if I was them and I had their experience in this situation, or I'd heard about this topic from these points, okay, I could understand why I would get to there. Now I can start to recognize, okay, what am I going after to persuade them away from that? And some of it is warning language, and some of it is enticement language. Isn't there something better over here? The other thing is just constantly, especially when you're in a difficult situation like that, is just constantly recognizing what is their specific pushback and firing again and building up, not to talk in combative terms, but you're not fighting them, you're fighting the pushback. Maybe there's marriage.
The idea.
Yes,
right.
That's right. That's marriage advice, by the way. Don't fight the other person, fight the idea.
Yeah.
Like that's what you want to go after. And I think
Great point.
That's probably the best way to go at it. It's hard. And it's also tricky because sometimes we look at a talk or a meeting as like, well, this is the silver bullet. No, but it's maybe my buddies in geology say that geology is really the study of a little amount over a long period of time. That's how you get the Grand Canyon, for instance. And in the same way, we have to trust that sometimes we're not just going to change someone in that moment, but you can do something. You can have something that leads them a little bit further down the line. And sometimes we don't know when they change their mind. It might take a long time.
What's been your proudest moment as a speaking coach and consultant?
Oh, my word. I can't put names on this, but there was a woman. I love this little woman. She was brilliant. I mean, brilliant. Way too smart. Like, brains shooting out of her hair. And worked for this tech company, medical tech company. And by all rights, she was about to get up in front of, I want to say, 1,300 people. And that's not what she did. Her job was doing the tech stuff. But by all rights, she should have been up there. She knew her stuff. She was the expert in the field. But it was the fear. And it was the fear that just had her wrapped up. And so she was doing a run through and standing up, and everything was just kind of falling apart. And she was just, and I know there was a lot of baggage there. And sometimes my coaching is, okay, here's what you need to do. You need to stand here, do this with your hands, And there's a lot of that. But then sometimes it's, I just sit shoulder to shoulder with somebody, try and make eye contact with them and go, do you realize like you're the expert here and you have a right to be up there? And she just, no, And then I'm gently, kindly going, I'm disagreeing with her because I'm going, no, that's not right. Like, you have every right to be up there. You're the one who should be up there. There's no one else who should be up there. It's you. It's you. And it took some time and took some work. And I'm not saying she went up there and she was the TED speaker of all TED speakers. But when she got off the stage, she was proud of herself. That's the kind of thing that, because that goes back to me in high school. Like, if I'm coaching myself in high school, that's where I go, I'm doing something fun and valuable. So those are, honestly, I get to work with CEOs, I get to work with big name people. That's fun. This is fun to do that. But it's those people that really kind of, I don't know, that fires my jets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, How should people frame fear?
Well, first off, recognize that there's a reason that you probably feel that for one reason or another. There's this old trope that everybody fears public speaking more than they fear death. And anytime someone says that, if I've got a little gumption, I go, I don't think that's true. I think it's true only because everyone tells each other that.
Yeah.
And so we're all told that you're afraid of public speaking, right? Not everybody. So. First off, I think it's a bit of a canard to say that this is like the worst thing in the world. I often will come at it from a perspective of I've started talking about it this way. I was talking to a group the other day. It was struggling with some confidence. I bet you there's been a time in your life when you overcame some sort of fear. Now, it might have been when you were a kid. It might have been when you went off to college. It might have been when you decided to take a class that was a little bit over your head, and you did it, and you accomplished something. In the words of Chip and Dan Heath in their book Switch, it's focusing on bright spots in their life. You've overcome fear before. Oh, no, I haven't. Yes, you have. Like, let's find that spot, and then let's apply it to this. And also, it's little by little. It's dribs and drabs. You grow over time. Nobody turns into a great speaker overnight. But when I can get them to feel a little bit of confidence, like at first I'll go, do this with your hands. They're like, this feels weird. And then they start doing, and then it becomes a little more natural. You watch the penny drop. And I know you guys have seen this in professional athletics. You've watched some really great coach who challenged you to try something a little different. You're like, this isn't going to work. There's no way. And then you're like, holy cow, that worked. It totally worked. And you go, then you're like, you'll go to that coach and go, what else you got? What else you got? Yeah. I think it's addressing it, going after the real core issue. I'm a big believer in the inside out philosophy. Amy Cuddy in her TED Talk talks about this. She has a great book called Presence, but her big thing that she comes back to over and over again is obviously our brains impact our body. If I'm nervous, I'm going to sit folded up, all that kind of thing. Well, you can try to change your brain and that'll affect your body. But her studies show that the opposite is true as well, meaning, and I do this all the time, if I am feeling unconfident, because I still deal with insecurity issues. If I find that I'm speaking to someone who's intimidating or in an intimidating environment, I find myself folding up. And I have this bad habit where I rub the back of my neck when I'm nervous. And I have to catch myself. And what I tell myself is, if you want to be confident, sit like a confident person. So I'll kind of force myself to, sit, or if I'm standing up, like square my shoulders and stand like a confident person. And dadgum, I'm telling you, it works. Mm-hmm. I can just tell you guys, I can tell your listeners, it works.
You hear it. You can hear the difference.
Yeah.
It's strange. And so what happens is, not only do you hear it, the big thing is I hear it. And my brain is going, hang on, who's this confident young man? It's me. Holy cow, it's me. I'm shocking myself. And then it becomes you. Amy Cuddy says, fake it till you become it. And, it's funny. I would listen to her TED Talk, and if I would go, well, that sounds like a lot of malarkey. But that's an old man term. But I have actually found it to be true. Like, I've tasted and seen this is a true thing. Yeah. And so I'm happy to pass it along to others. It's not mine, it's hers.
I love it.
How did your communication change as a father when communicating to your kids?
Well, one side way of answering that is my daughters, God bless, I love them. They're wonderful communicators. They're
shocker.
Well, I don't know. They go to a school. They're in a homeschool hybrid program, which we love. But the school is very big on we're going to have everybody stand up and speak in front of groups, and so they're forced to do this. And of course, Daddy, the speaker coach, is like, "All right, let's go." Good, yeah. And I work them hard, and they're better than most of my clients. They're real responsive.
They're getting away with murder then. They're not paying you a dollar.
I know. Well, yeah, that's right. I should have them do more. I think where my communication style changed or coaching is, you see this, maybe you've seen this with your children. You know, as a dad, I like to step in and go, well, let me tell you some things, you know, whether about life or whatever. And they're like, yeah. And then after about, you know, a minute and a half, their brain is full. And it's helped me recognize my clients get full. They're full. Like there's only so much. I'm sure you've had not great coaches who were like, okay, you need to do this. All right. And this, and this. And they, you know, they
I'm going through that with golf right now.
The weight is not to think it at all. Yeah.
As opposed to one thing at a time. Like my girls, they're about to do some auditions. They're in a theater production. They're about to do auditions next Monday. And I'm watching them do their monologues. I'm like, okay, change this. And they can't do that. But, you know, with golf, it's like, just do this. And then we'll add the next. And then we'll add the next. Plus, you know, going back to the golf analogy, I bet when you change how you hold the club, at first you're terrible. Like it's worse. And something he's like, well, you're too smart athletically to know that, like, you know better than this. But most people, I think, what a dumb adjustment. I'm hitting the ball more crooked and not as far. And the coach is thinking, but if you stick with it, you're going to hit it further and straighter than you ever have in the past. And I think that's the same with coaching.
Love it. I love it. I don't know. I'm just getting wrapped up in the stories, but no, I think this is incredible. I'd love to just dive into, you know, your work with CEOs. Mm-hmm. What has surprised you in your work with their communication? And what have some of the CEOs, what have they done really well where you're like, oh, you actually don't need any adjustments there?
Okay. I can't put names to these.
You don't want, yeah.
But maybe the biggest name I've worked with, he is a wonderful CEO. He is known as a wonderful CEO, and so you get behind closed doors with these guys. You know, like, let's see who they really are. This man, he's the last to speak. He's this Yoda character. He sits, he listens, and you can, I think Shakespeare says, you can hoist yourself with your own petard in this guy's presence. Meaning, if you don't check yourself, he'll let you talk for 7 minutes straight. And he won't cut you off. And he's not judging you. He's just listening, a very listening man. He's also the kind of guy, he would go speak at big events in Las Vegas, you know, thousands of people in his organization. And we do run-throughs. And he's talking to his comms people. We say, okay, got this. How do we change this? And then he'd look at me. And often I was there with another partner. He'd look and go, what do you got? Now, I knew I couldn't go, well, a few notes. Here's 20. No, I'd go, you need to do this, and this. And he'd go, got it. And he'd do it. Boom. It was just like right there. So he was fascinating to work with. There's another CEO I'm starting to do some work with, and he is a conundrum to me. He's not a good public speaker, but he's so enjoyable to listen to. Like, I look at him, if you watch the video of him, I'm not going to hold him up as the paragon. Do what this guy does. But his kindness comes through in how he talks. I was with him recently, and there was a group who was listening to him, and there was a Q&A session. And someone said, your competitor in the marketplace says this about your company, kind of something disparaging. And the CEO sat back and he said, you know, I could see why they would say that. And then he proceeded to unpack why he disagrees, but he'd go, I could see why they would say that. And I caught him a little bit later, and I said to him, I said, hey, I love the way you answered that. And I said, I get the feeling if someone punched you in the nose, you would step back and go, you know, there was probably a good reason that they did that. Just that level of, going back to our theme here, empathy. Yeah. Like, why turn the other guy into a bad guy? Mm-hmm. Why not be empathetic? And so that CEO, everything that he does it exudes empathy. Now, granted, that's his personality. He's an engineer by trade. Somehow, you know, usually engineer and empathy, those don't go together, but he's to some degree a feeler, and it comes through. And he's also an excellent leader, and his company is doing amazing things. When I think, you know, maybe you're aiming more towards maybe some of the younger CEOs out there. And there's one young but big-time CEO that I do some work with, and there is still a humility there. I think that, especially with the young bucks, and buckets. There needs to be humility in all regards. Now, you can't listen to everybody and every piece of opinion that comes down the pipe, but at least having an open mind towards what someone might point out to you, humility just goes a long way. And as I age, those are the kind of people I want to be around. I like confident people. I like people. And confidence and humility, they're not mutually exclusive in the least. But that humility really does matter.
How can people identify what advice to actually listen to?
Yes.
When you get ideas from everybody.
Well, the Bible says you can judge a tree by its fruit, and I think that's what you're looking for. You're looking for someone who has some sort of, you've seen the fruit of their advice, and every leader, what they're doing without knowing it is they're looking around them and they're seeing who has earned a little bit of capital in what I call the respect bank. I've done more and more training lately around executive presence, and that executive presence, especially with people who are lower than the C-suite people, I always tell them, imagine the leaders holding a piggy bank with your name on it. And the comments you make, the things you do, the way you show up, you're earning a little coin in that respect bank. And the more you get in there, the more capital you have to possibly disagree with that leader, to possibly challenge that leader, to possibly add some advice to that leader, to possibly agree with that leader and it matter to them. It's that respect bank. And so from the other side, I would say any leader needs to look around and go, gosh, who do I respect in the organization? And it's not, I would honestly say it's not a position thing. Often it's connected with the position, but my word, I've been in situations with CEOs, and this is what happens at events. They're surrounded by all these different people, and the CEO is like, okay, give me some feedback, and people chime in. And I've heard amazing things from low-level people. And good CEOs, if that person has built up enough respect, they go, I hear what she says, so I'm going with that.
Wow.
And those are people who, it's just about that respect. Have the people earn the respect? And again, going back to, does their advice bear fruit? And I think good leaders are able to assess that.
As we wrap up here, I'd love to know, what's the advice that you would give in terms of communication or meetings or speaking to the audience right now? Just 3 quick tips in terms of whether they're getting ready for a sales presentation, whether they're getting ready for a keynote, whether they're getting ready to communicate something with their significant other. Mm-hmm. 3 tips. I know that's kind of
That's fine. Empathy. Going back to Duarte, empathy. It's can I look at the other person and genuinely not just know what they're feeling, but care? Like, just care. Mm-hmm. We're all humans. We're all living a life of struggle and toughness, and some people are experiencing that, and they're like, do I care? So I would say lead with empathy. That it's become almost threadbare at this point in the marketplace to say those things. So I'm a little hesitant to say it because it sounds like, yeah, lead with empathy. No. I mean it like connect with that other person. Connect with that other person. The second thing would be build that opening around that empathy, authority, agenda. And maybe with that, I'll connect that with the closing. A lot of times when something's over, it's, I guess that's all the time we've got. So, all right, have an intentional closing. Summarize what you said. Hey, real quick before we go, just remember we talked about this, and this. Give a headline that has some aspiration in it. I really feel like if we act on this, we're going to get to what we're wanting to. And then after that, it's what is the next right step. Not, so you want to buy 500 of these, but it's, so I'm just going to encourage you, have a conversation with your COO about this one thing. Don't go, so go from here to Shanghai. Go, if you want to get to Shanghai, how do I get to DIA so I can get on the plane to get to Shanghai? Too many people, that last step is way too big. It's the next right thing. I think that's what it says in Frozen. The next right thing. And then whenever you can, bring in a story. Everyone's brains light up with stories. It doesn't have to, and I'm not saying, because people will balk at this and they'll say, well, there's a sales meeting. I'm not going to, imagine a dragon. It's not like that. But it is thinking in terms of a story because, and I realized this many, many years ago, the audience is living a story right now. And by audience, I just mean whoever's on the other side of the table. They are living a story right now. And the reason you're having a conversation with them is because that story, to some degree, within the context of what you're talking about, is not going to end well. And I just mean, like, left to their own devices, this could drift into something problematic, or they're not going to meet their goals, or whatever it is. Think about their current story, think about a better story, and lead them towards that better story. And just think in terms of story terms. And yeah, I think those would be the main things. But really the banner over it all is give a rip about the other person. Give a rip. Even if it's cold, calculated business, give a rip about the other person. I just finished reading a book. I just saw it at the library. Like, I'll pick that up. It's called Character Matters, and it's about George H.W. Bush, Daddy Bush, number 41. And he's known as a fine president. It was fine. He was a one-term president. And whatever, his presidency is irrelevant to me. This book is full of stories of how kind and generous and thoughtful this man was to everyone. And I'm reading this book, to be honest, weeping, wow. I want to be this guy. I want to care so much about everybody who walks into my purview, like anybody, like I just want to care and to make everyone feel like $1 million. And I know that's a high thing. And the humility this guy evidenced was just unbelievable. And it's not like, well, here's all the stuff this guy. It was stories from people who knew him. And even people who disagreed with him politically. They said, let me tell you, this guy, he was still kind. There's a interesting story right there in the middle of the book where a journalist really took a swing at him, and it was personal. It was bad. And that journalist was supposed to be on Air Force One to go to the next stop, wherever it was. And she was running late, and she wasn't going to make it in time. And so there was a guy who was in charge of, okay, are all the journalists on? He's like, well, she's not on yet, but we got to go. So they took off. They get in the air, and President Bush hears that she was left behind and comes back, and he says to the guy in charge of getting the people on the plane, why is she not on the plane? She was running late. We had to go. We'll get her a car or something together there. He said, we are never vindictive. We are never vindictive. So if this was about getting back at her, that's not what we do. I may not like what she wrote. That is not what we do. And he made sure she had a car and got to the next place in time. But it's that kind of thing that I think any business leader, any human being needs this. We're all a bunch of humans talking to other humans. Be kind, be generous, be thoughtful, be empathetic.
Love it.
What are you most curious about regarding a professional athlete's life?
Well, right before we fired up the microphones, y'all threw out a dreadful statistic about bankruptcy, and which I've heard that before. But what was the stat around
78% of athletes, of NFL players, are bankrupt and divorced or chemically dependent, or all three, 2 years after they're done playing.
That is just awful and shocking.
How about CEOs? If we were to put CEOs, where would they rank between being broke after they sold their company or got kicked out?
I don't think it'd be broke, but I can't imagine their marriages are doing well.
Yeah.
I'm more, as we were talking before we got on, I'm kind of zeroed in on marriages lately and what makes a marriage succeed and why are so many around in my world failing. And so to me, when you ask about the professional athletes, I'm just fascinated by relationships, and I'm fascinated by that marriage relationship and how it could go so far off the rails. And I get it. I understand it. Like, this is a massive change when an athlete leaves the limelight, leaves being in the public spotlight. I mean,
free parking at a stadium.
Come on. Who wouldn't get upset?
In 1 year, and I would say in 1 year of professional sports, in 1 year of life, 1 year in the NFL, is about, to me, 5 to 7 years of somebody's normal life.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of intensity,
the relationship, things that you can do. I mean,
travel.
You could just take it, for example. I mean, you can look at Peyton over the last couple of weeks. He's in Paris for the Olympics, opening ceremonies, did all that. Pro Football Hall of Fame. And then he's back in Colorado coaching his kids. That was in 2 weeks. He's in another country.
Right.
I have another good buddy who's in the NBA, and I mean, he's been to Paris, London, and he will be over in China and Paris. He's done that all this summer. So, your relationship, 1 year of you dating somebody or being with someone or married to someone in the NFL is 5 to 7 years of life because you moved 18 times in 5 years. Like people don't move 18 times in their life.
No.
You know, living out of suitcases, living in different places, going to the Super Bowl, going to these practices, going to these games, all these different things. So
it's a different world. It does make me think of, I had a good buddy who, so what I kind of hear is, maybe there's a similarity here. I had a good buddy who was big in business, and he traveled constantly. So he was going to the Middle East, he was gone, and his wife was at home raising the 3 little kids. And I remember she confided in my wife one time, the wife did, that things are so much easier when he's gone. And when he comes home, everything's different, everything's a mess, and then he comes home, does some things, plays a little golf, then he's back out on the road. And this is not sustainable. They got divorced. I have to think there's some similarity to an athlete. I think this would be a fascinating, I think in terms of movies, but I think it'd be a fascinating little movie of what is a marriage like for an athlete when he's done. And he comes home and he's coming to terms with who he is, who he really is, now that those things are taken away. And the wife is coming to terms with, now this guy is home and we haven't been used to him home. How is everything going to change? And what's that phase like? What are the right things that need to be in place for them to, as we were talking about before the microphone started, re-opt in and to take your marriage to that next level?
I think you got to get a coach or a therapist to help you talk about roles and goals.
That's good.
Nobody sits down to talk about, all right, like I'm home now. Like, I mean, you're super intentional, like with your kids and like taking them to school, but like, it sounds like a conversation was had there. You just weren't like, hey, honey, you're done with this. I got it. You know,
that wouldn't go well.
It wouldn't go well.
So I think things like that are super important. And like, are those conversations had? And like, do you take a moment to really pause and have the conversation?
Yeah. Ryan, did you?
Yeah. I had great advice from a great coach. He told us at the end of the season, and I knew it was my last season, he goes, when you get home, you lock yourself in the basement for a week and you start figuring out how your wife's running things because she's been running it without you. Don't go home and start making changes.
You watch.
So I was that one of the things that made me successful was my ability to listen. So I came home and we woke up. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to, go down to the basement or I'll come back up or I just kind of kept that I'm in the basement mentality. If we were going somewhere, I was going to carry the bags, not dictate who's driving. So I just kind of let that come back. But I'll tell you what, I think gets people the most in that marriage, in professional sports, I think it's in business too, is that person willing to fight through with you, whatever you face. Because it's easy when you're playing football and they don't play in the game to say, like, you got this, sweetie, you can do it. But it's when the two of you are doing something or somebody wants to go back to work or go to school, like, if you don't know that person's going to fight through with you, is kind of looking for a reason why not to join you, that's when it goes off. And I don't know how you do it in season because we're just not around. That
to me, I can't imagine what it's like for the spouse of a professional athlete. It seems like no different than a politician. Probably, I would say, to some degree, some of the CEOs work with the same. Like, what is the deal that has been struck? I can't imagine. My wife would not sign her name to that paper. I know that, and yet some would. And great, but when that season ends, gosh, that next season has just got to be. It's a redefining.
Who I am, I've only been in my 30s for 3 years, but who I am now, and to what you met me 10 years ago, I am a completely different person. I think that's also a professional athlete thing. So I retired at 30. That's like, people you don't even know who you are in your 20s. Right. So,
how would you articulate those differences?
Language.
I would say, the way I think about things, I would say, just understanding life in general. I'm very thankful for the life that I do have and the life that I currently live. When you're playing in the NFL, I didn't think I could do anything wrong. It was in the 1% of the 1%. I won a Super Bowl in my second year and caught Peyton's last pass at 23. What is anybody else going to tell me about life?
Right. Sure.
I've already done it all. I had won at every level. 2 state championships in high school, 3 Big Ten championships in college, and then a Super Bowl in my second year. And I played with, at the time, the best quarterback, or arguably the best quarterback of all time. And I caught his last pass.
Right.
Life's pretty easy, sounds like to me. And then life happens to you.
Yeah.
And I think you have these moments, these S-curve moments where life knocks you down, you get cut, you signed a year lease in Chicago, and you're no longer living there.
It's been 6 months.
I think you learn about those things. And then I would say the pandemic happening was a super eye-opener for me, because at that point in my life, I had only lived in the athlete bubble. I was an athlete in high school, college, and then went to the pros. And politics and racial things, they exist, but not in my day-to-day. Like, I hang around with white people, I hang around with black people, Muslims, whatever it may be. I went to high school like that. My high school was super diverse. So I never saw, like, you see racial things, but like I don't see it on a day-to-day. Standing next to one of my white teammates and we're fine, like all good. And then the world stops, and then you see all this going on, and you're like, oh, I have a different perspective, and I need to be thoughtful about everybody that I'm around, and everybody actually has a story to tell. And then you just have these life moments where it's like, oh no, I'm actually just like everybody else. Like,
it's got to be eye-opening.
Super.
Now I bet you there's something, because it's easy to go, oh man, it must be so hard after being a professional athlete to go in normal life, regular life. But I bet you there's some things that y'all have. I'm not talking about money or whatever, but there's some things y'all have that other people don't. I bet you most of us have not been yelled at for 10 hours a day to go achieve something.
Or when you did something right. You can get yelled at when you did something right. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you would go, it's kind of nice I went through that. I've got this skill, this mindset, whatever it is that your average Joe doesn't, because they didn't go through what y'all went through.
It's mandatory.
Oh, you've said this before to me. Will you explain that a little more?
Yeah, it's mandatory. I think when you go to college, you fit in with everybody else. When the lift is at 5:30 in the morning, it's mandatory. You have to be there. Practice is mandatory. It's not optional. It doesn't matter how good you are. You have to do it.
Yeah.
And you have to do it year round. And then in the NFL, like, they don't have to wait for you. There's 53 seats. There are no open chairs. You can't apply for the job. You have to move somebody out of the way.
Yeah.
So do you want to play or not? And then once you run out that tunnel for the first time, you're like, oh, I'll do whatever it takes. Or if you just get if I was super blessed, the locker room that I came into, this team had just gone to the Super Bowl and got blown out by Seattle, but some of the best players in the league were on that team. And it was, there's a spot here. What are you going to do? But like, you can't like pick and choose when you want to do it.
About you?
I have a gift of smiling at failure.
Oh, really?
Ever since I can remember, I smile at it. And I think one of my proudest moments as a dad, I was asking my son the other day, what's something you would do if you knew you wouldn't fail? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, if you knew a failure wouldn't stop you. And he goes, well, I wouldn't let a failure stop me from anything. I was like,
that's my son.
I'm like, wow, man, because that's it, and from that.
That's a great answer.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, he's 10, bro. I'm like, I literally said, you keep that up, everything you work towards will happen. You have that mentality, that's going to happen. And more than anything, so much is a choice. It's a choice if it's mandatory now. You can choose not to show up to a mandatory workout. That's your choice. And so, especially when I left the NFL, in the NFL, especially the teams I was on towards the end of my career, you're around people that want to be great. And now you've left that world, and a lot of people have made choices not to be great, and that's okay. That may be best for them. That may be best for their family. That may be the best they can do from where they came from. But those choices that you have to make in a game, I just recognize that so much is a choice. It's a choice whether you stop because somebody told you couldn't do it. It's a choice whether you re-opt into your marriage or not. Are there benefits and consequences? Absolutely, but I just see so many choices. And so when somebody's telling me a story, even if it's things that I wouldn't do, I just hear the choices that they made. And my wife even at times been like, Ryan, you were real quiet when they're telling their story of failure and how they want to succeed. And I said, well, they don't want to succeed. She's like, what? I'm like, well, they just said they had an opportunity to do something. They didn't want to do it. And now they don't have the opportunity to do it again. So now they're upset. Like, they made a choice. I'm not going to feel bad for them. And it can make me seem callous, but you make a choice.
Right.
Now, Do you have the facilities to make a choice? Are you prepared for that choice? Those are all the questions we can't handle. But so many people make choices, and it has gotten them where they are today. And it's a choice. Many things are a choice that people may think are mandatory, may think are optional. But that choice is going to dictate a lot.
I always thought it was mandatory. I was just thinking, well, I want to make it to the NFL.
But that was the choice you made, right? Like the choice you made was to believe that it was mandatory. And we've had teammates that chose to believe that it wasn't mandatory, and you're gone.
Now I'm curious, do y'all, Bennie, eventually yours, but Ryan, yours?
No. Football? No way.
In general, professional sport. Let's start with football, and then let's go to professional sports.
Football, no. Golf, tennis.
Because of body issues?
The space mentally you have to be in to compete for 25 weeks in the NFL is a very intense, violent place. And I want my children to do whatever it is that they want. Because, if you went across from even right now, if you were in the league and you were the cornerback, press coverage against Bennie Fowler, and you were his best friend, he is going through you, and when you squeal and hit the ground, he's not stopping.
Right.
He's going to go catch that ball. That's an intense place. That's not the same as a merger and acquisition, right? Like nobody's coming in and knocking you out for that deal. Like there's no physical consequence. I want my kids to choose what they want, and it's my job as a father to help encourage them to do the work.
If I have sons and they want to play the game of football, I am going to encourage it because I think it is it's the ultimate team game, but also I think it's the ultimate game of life. Football is a microcosm of life on a day-to-day basis, and especially in a game. There's a winner and loser on every play. There is the need to communicate in high-pressure situations. There's a need to understand communication. Hey, if you don't understand something, what is the signal? Or, hey, what is the way you best learn to help you understand this? And how do we go execute it together? Most football plays, especially on the offensive, not even on offense, defense, and special teams, the plays don't work if everybody's like not moving together. So in business, I think it's the same way. I think it's also a microcosm of business when you have all these incredible athletes who are the 1% of the 1%, and you have teams who don't win zero games. How does that happen? We're all good. That's a lack of leadership, coaching, communication. There is no vision, and the roster and the team is poorly put together. So I think it's that. I think it helps you not to look past race, but to understand where somebody's coming from, how they might have grown up. You have to do that all. They do that all within 45 days in training camp. You bring in a rookie class of 18 to 20 people. Most of them, or some of them, will make the team. You bring in free agents, and then you bring back veterans. But it's a clean slate every year. We're starting over. The Super Bowl for Kansas City doesn't actually matter now. So you have to reinvent yourself. You have to reinvent your team. And I also think it teaches you, Ryan and I were talking about this, these ebbs and flows of life. You're going to have a busy season. You're going to have a more relaxed off season. Then you're going to have to ramp it back up again. And then you have to kind of figure things out. So I just think football is the ultimate game. But if they want to play other sports, I'm going to encourage that too. But you're going to have to need a team of people. Life's a team sport. So you're going to need coaches. You're going to need mentors.
You're going to have to practice what it is you do want to do. Your daughter's practicing for their monologue. That comes
we practice so much.
Oh my God,
we practice so much.
And the things we would practice, there's, I'll just say this, but we'll practice a play when I was in college, we practiced a play the whole year. It was a direct snap to Darius Walker for 2-point conversion. We didn't run it till the 11th game of the season, but we practiced it every week.
Really?
And that kind of willingness to
Did you think it was crazy? Why are we practicing this?
No, because my coach just came from winning 3 Super Bowls with the Patriots, so I was like, this is how it's done.
We did that. I mean, not to rub it in your face about the Notre Dame thing, but
can't help himself.
The little Giants fake field goal play. We beat you guys in overtime in 2010. You were in the league, but we ran this fake field goal. We had practiced that fake field goal starting from the spring, so it was almost 5-6 months of practicing that. It's there's no way we're going to ever run this. And our coach called it. And we executed it.
Wow.
But like, I didn't think we were going to call it like
Sure.
second game of the season.
Right.
This has been incredible. What an incredible time.
Jeff,
Y'all are
appreciate
great,
you
y'all
joining
are
us.
great gentlemen. I can't tell you what an honor and a thrill it is to spend a minute, let alone however much time we spent together. So thank you guys. And by the way, you're both, for what it's worth, from my little perspective, you're both wonderful communicators. You're engaging and fun. And so appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Great to have you.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Gridiron and Growth with your co-host Ryan Harris and myself. Big shout out to Big Up Studios and Streamline Media for all their help with everything that we do. Please like and subscribe to this podcast. Please leave a review and please send us any questions at the gridironandgrowthpod@gmail.com.